The number of Americans concerned about getting sick from COVID dipped to its lowest number in March. That's according to a new Gallup poll, which found only 35% of people in the U.S. are worried about contracting that illness. That number is the lowest it has been since April 2020.
So the poll also found that 77% of U.S. citizens say the COVID situation is improving, up from 60% in February. Editor-in-chief at Gallup, Mohamed Younis, he joins us now to discuss those findings. Good to see you, Mohamed. Thanks for joining us, man.
Good to be back, and it's great to finally have good news to share. I feel like it's been a year. Really.
I know. So break down some of the indicators. What is the good news here around optimism, around how people are feeling and all that?
Absolutely. So to put it really in one sentence, fear, worry of the virus, contracting the virus is down. Hope is up. Let's start with worry about the virus. What's really interesting is you see the public opinion impact or reaction to the vaccination regime and how it's been rolled out across the U.S. For example, today, if you're over 65, you're actually much less likely to be worried about contracting the virus because most of those folks have already had access to a vaccine. Right. What's also interesting is that those who are fully vaccinated are obviously not as worried about contracting the virus, but those who are not, or are sort of in the halfway, it really does grade out based on what level of vaccination you've received. So what's really interesting right now, actually, is the age inverse of what we saw at the beginning of that trend that you showed on the screen a year ago, where those 65 and older now have dropped 25% in their worry of actually contracting the virus. We've also seen, of course, worry about access to testing and also access to medical care really drop. In terms of the situation overall, what's really interesting is that there's now a convergence between Republicans and Democrats on saying the situation is getting better. In fact, Republicans were the ones this month who increased the most in saying the situation overall in the U.S. is getting better. They increased by 23%. Today, 84% of Democrats, 69% of independents, and 75% of Republicans are saying that the situation overall is getting better. What's really interesting as well is those who are not planning to get a vaccine also say that the situation is getting better. So right now, 63% of those that say they have no plans of getting a vaccine also agree that the situation in the U.S. overall is improving. So really, hope is on the rise across the board on that front.
Yeah.
And Mohamed, how long are people expecting the COVID-related disruptions to continue here?
And that's a great question we've continued to ask. About 4 in 10 Americans still think it's going to continue through the end of this year, 2021. But when we ask people about their own personal lives, are you still being impacted? We do see now a slow decrease in the level of those that say that they have been impacted a great deal or a fair amount. 64% of Americans today say that. The high that we reached was 81%. Back in about this time last year. So overall improving satisfaction with the vaccination process in terms of sort of the pathway, the most likely pathway to all of us getting back to normal, is also really high. And again, there's a convergence across party lines that's really interesting. So overall, 68% of Americans are satisfied with the vaccine rollout across the country, not necessarily where they live. But interestingly, 66% of Republicans agree. So they're basically on par with the national average. 73% of Democrats say that they're satisfied. We've seen a huge improvement really since January across the board on that metric. And again, those who don't plan to be vaccinated, 57%, are actually satisfied with the rollout across the country. So even if they're not planning to participate, people feel like it's going relatively well, or at least about 6 in 10 of those that don't plan.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting. I mean, that's the last question I have for you, actually, is do you have numbers on vaccine hesitancy and what percentage of the population is still saying, I'm going to pass?
Yeah, right now we're at about 7 in 10 Americans. It's actually creeping up now closer to 8 in 10, basically say they want to access, if they have access, they'll take it. There's still a group of Americans that don't plan to take it. But I think these numbers make a lot of sense, Crystal, because if you're looking to get back to normal, and these are the things that are standing in the way of you going about your business in daily life with the lockdowns, with businesses having to make specific adjustments, it does make sense that people kind of want to see this behind us, no matter what your position is on the situation. Fear is still sort of following that partisan divide that we saw throughout the past year. So Democrats are still a little more concerned about contracting it than Republicans. But in terms of kind of how things are going on, the things we know and touch, right? Those of us who aren't scientists, things are definitely moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
Good news. Great to see you, Mohamed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to be back.
More Rising for you after this.